session, I would like to welcome you all from us, the SI Cities Hub, which is Anja. Maybe you can wave your hand. Me, Carl, and Stephen. And we also have the Mumbai Hub. This is a co-creative event between our two hubs. And we will be digging or diving deeper into the transitions, into transitioning. I don't know who of you has been in the event yesterday. Maybe you can raise your hand shortly so we get an idea. So yeah, already many of you. That's great, because yesterday was, for those who were not there, we will have a short summary of yesterday's session in a bit, and then we will dive deeper into the transition. So today's agenda is we will have a little check-in with all of you so we get to know each other a bit better. Then we have, as I said, the summary of yesterday's event, a few words on this. Then we will present to you the 4 major transitions that the Mumbai Hub came across when they published their paper. And then we will have breakout rooms where we will co-create a bit our common understanding or collect our collective knowledge about these 4 transitions and what they mean in the context of Mumbai. After this, we will have a short summary of what ideas arise in the breakout rooms, and then we will go into the feedback and check out. We would be really happy for you all to stay until the end. Every level of knowledge is highly welcome and very valuable for us. So yeah, we will talk about the transitions in Mumbai. Why are we doing this today? Mostly because we want to understand a bit better what it is that we are experiencing nowadays, and to maybe also understand a bit better how we can work towards transitioning our systems from a way or a path that leads a bit to unsustainable ways of organizing to more sustainable and healthy ones. But yeah, let's start with a little check-in. I would kindly ask you, for all of those who have found already your way into the Miro board, if you could just grab a dot and place it at your current location. So from where are you participating? And for those who are not at the Miro board, you can write it into the chat and we will place your dots for you. Great, it's good to see you all here together and be with all of you in this learning room here. In the next step, I would ask you to think shortly about your current state of mood. So for this, please grab one of the smileys, copy-paste them, and put them onto one of the sticky notes and write your name under it. So we know a bit how you are feeling today, what your energy level is, what your mood is, basically. All right. Then I will give the word over to Maya, who will present, or to Anja.
Great. So great to have you all here and ready for this session. We're going to brief you quickly about the day 1. So just in case for those who weren't there yesterday, what happened was we introduced the position paper, and we also were lucky enough to have an amazing guest, Mr. Manas Rath, and we were talking about the story of systems in Mumbai and how systems and systems innovation is very much needed to tackle all of the wicked challenges that Mumbai faces and will face in the future. And these are some screenshots of our session where Maya was first introducing us to the position paper. And then we had a lucky, great discussion about all of the different topics that are very much needed. And we had very interesting points in our chat as well, and people were engaging and having great discussions. So here you can see possibly some of the interesting ideas here. And yes, so we are going to today look at some of the emerging tensions and following that, the transitions in Mumbai. And just to give you a bit of this overview for those that are kind of new to the context of Mumbai, there are lots of complex and very complicated emerging tensions in Mumbai, such as the housing infrastructure tension, transportation challenges, utilities management, and within that, complex water systems, as well as electricity supply challenges. And these are some of the tensions that, along with waste management, that Mumbai is facing. And if Maya, you have anything to add, I'll leave this as my introduction to and summary of day one and lead you to the transitions part of Mumbai, what that means and what we will be working on today.
Yeah, thanks, Anya. So like Anya shared, we will have Manas talk us through some of these emerging tensions with examples from his work, and also how a systems dynamic or a systems thinking approach is called for. So that takes us to the transitions. Actually, the transitions are a way of holistically thinking at what and in what ways are the challenges connected to each other. So we look at them in a holistic way, and that also include the participation of a diverse set of stakeholders from the government, from the private sector, citizens like women and the academia. Uh, and that's how we will look at an emergent future in the context of urban development. So we have specifically laid down 4 transitions. These transitions are more like provocations or desired future states that we're talking about. And I'll also briefly explain what was in our mind when we wrote down these 4 transitions, and then we will move on to the co-creation. So the first one is growth to degrowth, where typically Mumbai has had a growth-oriented mindset, which is heavily dependent on increasing the economic output and increasing the wealth of individuals and organizations, because it has been, like I had explained yesterday, on a continuous expansion mode for over 3 to 4 decades now. But that has led us into a kind of stagnation. And so there is a need to change or transform the mindset to a degrowth mindset, where we're talking about essentially reducing the material use and reducing energy consumption, if you will, and leading towards more ecologically sustainable outcomes, which will make the city better or desirable for all, and a healthier place, like healthier and happier, like Manas was stating. Moving on, the second transition is where we talk about demanding public goods to evolving citizen-led initiatives. So typically, not just in Mumbai, but in India, we've had a lot of power vested in a few elected representatives, and then as an unintended consequence, citizens typically have thought that once they have their respective ward representatives and they pay taxes and they do their duty ends there, and it is for the municipal authorities and the state authorities to make sure that public goods are being provisioned. But that is not a sustainable model, as we've learned. And there's also a lot of research by think tanks and advocacy groups that do state that an active citizen-based engagement model is required, and that's and that's what the second transition is about. That we have to evolve to more citizen-based initiatives. We did look at Sunday streets as one of the examples of that. The third transition is where we talk about from piecemeal approaches to perceiving cities as complex socio-ecological-technical systems. So again, we've seen in the past that if there is a traffic problem, then there is infrastructure that's built. If there is a housing issue, let's say for a lower strata of the society, then there is slum rehabilitation. So it's a piecemeal approach that has been followed, and the interconnectivity of the different emergent tensions have been lost somewhere. So we'd rather look at the whole urban space of Mumbai as one complex socio-ecological technical system. What that would mean, though, is envisioning new ways of perceiving the city and gleaning from a variety of disciplines like political economy, sociology, technology, artificial intelligence has come up in a big way, and using concepts from complexity and system dynamics, like again Manas was explaining, to reimagine a new kind of urban development paradigm. And the last but not the least is what we call from extractive to regenerative resource management. So this is in some way connected to the growth mindset that we talked earlier on, because that kind of a mindset typically expects you to be exploitative of the natural resources, which has led to a lot of social inequality and environmental degradation. And so we think that we need to reimagine participatory governance processes throughout the supply chain. And we are also looking at not just the geography of Mumbai, but also adjoining peri-urban areas, and there being a give and take of the supply chain in a manner to regenerate the scarce resources for distributed value creation. So this is what we have in mind with the 4 transitions. But of course, to put down what are some ideas or experiences, I think we will have to go to the Miro and then explore further. So I'll hand over back to you, Anya.
Thanks, Maya, for elaborating on the 4 transitions. So basically with this event, as you already published as a main goal of the paper, is to move away from this incremental thinking that leads us to approach every issue in a linear and separated way, and to think more broadly about the fundamental changes that we need for creating more sustainable systems. These 4 transitions represent basically that every system is always in a state of transition. This is a really normal approach to what systems do. The question is, where is this transition directing towards? And we have seen in the past centuries that it is in some parts going into a direction that is not really helping to create healthier conditions for people and planet. So transitions, as they occur in long horizons and through all levels of systems, are also not so easy to grasp. Therefore, we want to, in these 4 breakout rooms, understand each of the 4 transitions a bit better, and to see how can we work more intentionally to create the future outcome that is desirable. So for this, yeah, we have these 2 breakout rooms. They will be having a framework right in the middle. You will see it in a bit. You are free to choose whatever breakout rooms seems to be interesting for you. And you can switch breakout rooms whenever you find that you want to engage more in another discussion or so. But yes, in these breakout rooms, we offer the framework of having 2 circles that overlap. These 2 circles represent one state of equilibrium and another one. So we are transitioning from one state of equilibrium into the other one and are doing so constantly. But for grasping it a bit better, we have these circles, and we will explore what is it from the current state, where do we have examples of the current state we want to change, and where can we find examples, especially from the case of Mumbai, for future states that we want to bring into the system now and that are already there. So what needs to be deconstructed at some point, and what needs to be constructed at the same time. And we will focus on Mumbai, but if you are here from any other context, or also your experiences are valuable, and we can see if we can bring them into or if we can use something of this for the Mumbai context.
And Birte is going to be in room 1, from growth to degrowth. I'm going to be in room 2, from demanding public goods to evolving citizen-led initiatives for cultivating commons. Stephen is going to be in room number 3, about from piecemeal approaches to perceiving cities as complex socio-ecological-technical systems. And then in room 4, Carl is going to cover the topic from extractive to regenerative resource management. So feel free to use these questions as guidelines as well in your breakout sessions. And I've opened up the rooms now, so you should be able to enter the rooms that you want to join.
I'm joining from Delhi.
Coming from Delhi, all right, okay.
Yeah.
So not Mumbai.
Yeah, so yeah, I was curious about this transition from extractive to regenerative, because I just completed my MBA, and in my master's thesis I have done a research on regenerative finance. I have developed a system map of regenerative finance. So I was curious about, other than the finance, how we can, make a transition from extractive to this regenerative resource management thing. Like, I was like wondering, are there any real examples, or if possible, then how does it look like? Because I've seen only examples of regenerative agriculture. Other than agriculture, there are not many examples in regeneration.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious, like, in the Mumbai case, for the Mumbai city, how does this transition look like from extractive to regenerative?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we're here to try and collectively answer, I suppose. The way that this is kind of been structured is to kind of, I suppose, dive a little bit deeper from our own experiences. I think with the financial model is a really interesting one. Is especially kind of financing business, and obviously kind of relates to the other transition around growth to degrowth, and where do you invest, how do you invest in an equitable way and in a more more sustainable and fairer system. There's a lot of kind of in the UK at the moment, and a lot of the conversation is, how do investors and how do funders start to reimagine kind of return on investment and things like that. When you kind of, so it's translating it into this particular transition for Mumbai, is that agriculture is a really good example. but it's more kind of the wider resources as well. So kind of the other things that are being extracted, they use, for example, around waste management and utilities, and the over reliance on fossil fuel, around kind of transportation and mobilities. Again, a lot of it isn't electrified or kind of a sustainable method of kind of public transportation. A lot of it is outdated. So there's the landscape there to think more regeneratively from a mindset perspective, I suppose. In terms of examples, yeah, there's a few. I don't know Mumbai terribly well, so this is kind of where my knowledge kind of is deferred, I suppose. But I know certainly around kind of neighborhood movements to actually think more locally, hyper locally, and where they recognize where extraction is taking place, and they try to source alternatives or find another way that they can control themselves, which isn't the easiest thing to do, because it depends. You rely an awful lot on governance and other infrastructure be able to kind of plug into, and again, in terms of the political and the social environment, and also the access to the right technology and people being able to divest technology to those hyper local groups to actually take control and empower them to know what to do with that, and obviously still do it in an organic way, is quite a challenge. What I've noticed more, and I think you have a really good example with the agriculture it's probably the most common way of kind of referring to something as a regenerative system or regenerative business, because so you're working with the earth and more connected to kind of those organic systems. But I've noticed there's more people involved in permaculture going into kind of co-working spaces or hosting events with startup entrepreneurs and businesses, and using the analogies that they have with their own work and kind of transferring it into that mindset within business culture. That's one thing which I have noticed, the kind of sharing and going, it's not in a box around just farming and agriculture, but actually you can transfer some of this thinking into how you do your own work. So I'd be curious about kind of, I'm going to make a quick comment about your prevalence of architecture, of agriculture example. But is there any other examples that you've spotted in this world of moving from extractive to regenerative practice?
It's mostly related to finance. Even if we talk about the business, like you said, so mostly it's all about. Can you hear me? Right? You can hear me, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit quiet, but I can hear you.
Okay, so yeah, so the examples that I have seen is mostly related to the investments, like where the business should invest their money, the capital expenditure, and how they should manage their waste. How they should take the responsibility of their product life cycle, and where the raw materials are coming from, and where their product after the life cycle is going. So I every time I see the examples of regeneration, it's mostly related to the investments. So even for the agriculture, like in the agriculture is the most common example, because you can it's it's like visible. You have clearly seen the difference between the land, before regeneration and after regeneration. It's a very clear, visible example of regeneration. Like, okay, this land has been regenerated. But that's, for me, it's very difficult to see in the business, or you can say in the cities, because probably, uh, probably there is no example, or we can say they are on the path of regeneration, but it's at the first step. So in the world. I don't know. I mean, I personally don't know. I'm always curious about knowing this stuff, like, which business is actually the regenerative business.
Well, that's a big question, and it's something which certainly being exploring in a capitalist setup is very difficult.
Yeah, right.
There's definitely organizations who refer to themselves as a regenerative business or have regenerative principles, but their business model is not regenerative.
Exactly right.
It fundamentally can't be, because it's still about kind of shareholder wealth and profits and things like that. So unless we start to rethink actually what the purpose of a business, it is really challenging. I think kind of Patagonia is always the one that's referred to
Patagonia,
as the kind of the North Star model. But even then, that's not. They do some obviously fantastic things, but in terms of its traditional model, it's still operating within a capitalist environment, and it's still things to work through on that model. But that's always the one which tends to get referred to. So in terms of, is a regenerative business even possible? That's something certainly to kind of explore. However, sorry,
you please.
We're going to put down here about kind of the economics. We mentioned kind of capitalist economic models.
Right. I mean, even at the policy level, like if I see the policies or the policies adopted by the businesses, even at the policy level, like we talk about degrowth, but these businesses or any business, they doesn't talk about degrowth. All they talk about the growth, right? So by growth, which usually means selling more product, doesn't matter that product is needed in the society or in the world, but they don't care about that. All they care is just selling more product and getting more profit. Even if you can, you know, you can, what do you call that, recycle it, or you can minimize your raw material requirements, but still, if you keep selling it, you still need raw material for your new product. So even at the policy level, I don't understand, or I didn't see any business who said like, okay, so we don't think uh, there is a need of this product more than this quantity, so we should not sell it. For an example, like I was thinking about Apple, right? So Apple sells their mobile phones every year. They come out with a new model every year, and they also continue their old models at least for 2 3 years. So most of the Apple customers, they buy their new model every year, right? So what happens is the old model, it gets waste. It becomes a waste. Maybe they give it to someone. Maybe they sell it in the second-hand market or something. But if they keep bringing new models every year, then definitely consumers will buy it. Doesn't matter the consumer actually need that model or not, but they keep on bringing new models in the market, right? So this kind of thing, I really feel like it's very extractive. It's very extractive.
Hugely, and in terms of and exploitative as well, but in terms of the amount of energy that is produced in just required, in producing those goods, and then trying to repurpose, upcycle, whatever kind of that looks like, but eventually they end up in landfill. There isn't really a place for them to go other than eventually being broken down into six. They're not biodegradable. I just wanted to say hello to Anshul, because I know he's kind of joined us a few minutes ago, and he's just sitting there patiently. So I just wanted to say hello. Yeah, and I think that's true of an awful lot of just models full stop, is that it's short-termism that is kind of embedded within within our business models. I think it was a really good example, or certainly a good kind of reference point, I suppose, is around kind of land and actually how long it takes for soil to regenerate. It's not a case of we can suddenly just go, oh, well, we won't make any more plastics, or we won't dump stuff here, or we won't kind of walk over this particular, around this particular lake or this particular mountain. It's and then suddenly everything's okay. It takes decades for that soil to find a balance, get all its chemical nutrients kind of back in order again. So you can have these big shocks, but it takes time to navigate. And that's the biggest, I always think with the tension in a business model is that you have the here and now. I've got to sell stuff, people got to buy stuff, I need to pay people's wages, etc. There were those tensions within the day-to-day operations of a business versus what we're talking about from a regenerative point of view is this intergenerational long-termism of thinking, of going, what am I doing now that will potentially impact in 6-7 generations time? And that's just not within the mindset or the capacity of any business, I would suggest. Right. And certainly when you've got tension around things like utilities and power and people being able to just live their lives, being able to cook their food on a stove or be able to put their lights on and things like that, is that people want to live in a comfortable and have a quality of life today. But when you say to them, yeah, but if we do that now, then we're damaging what your great-grandchildren or your great-great-grandchildren can actually do in their quality of life. It's like, well, that's all hypothetical. So how do you bring it to reality? How do you make it real for people of going, your choices today have a direct influence and impact on kind of the next and future generations and their quality of life? So how do we find that balance? And it's not an easy conversation, as you've rightly kind of intimated. So certainly not an easy thing, but a necessary thing. Yeah, right. For sure. So in terms of, I suppose from a resource point of view, especially kind of extracting from the ground, and whether that's fossil fuel or etc. Are you aware of movements either within Mumbai or Delhi or elsewhere in India where people are consciously moving towards renewables and also thinking about how they work better with land over time? Or is it still very much a case of a day-to-day, we just need to keep the lights on kind of thing?
Sorry, please, pardon me?
Oh, sorry, I was saying within India, are you aware of any examples of where there are either, I don't know, community-based projects, or there are maybe kind of neighborhoods or even municipalities of where they're consciously thinking about how they move towards renewable energy sources and thinking about how they work with land and where their food comes from and that kind of thing?
I knew about the transportation industry, particularly the governments, in some of the government offices, they mandate to especially travel in the electric vehicles. That is one approach. Another is like in Delhi, if I talk about Delhi, so garbage is a big problem in Delhi. Garbage collection, garbage segregation, and garbage dumping. That's a big problem. So what they do is there are, piles of garbage at 2 or 3 locations around Delhi. And every year they cause a lot of pollution because sometimes because of the heat, because of the human errors, human problems, sometimes the fire ignites there, so it causes a lot of pollution. So what they have done is, even in the past and now also they are doing it, that the the land where this all garbage has been dumped, they they uh, transferred it to a park. They dumped it in the land and they put a grass on the top, and they make it into the park for the public park, like open public park.
Yeah.
So there are, even still they have this same policy. Like I remember there are two locations where they are thinking the same. We will, transform it into a public parks. So although I don't think that's the best solution, because there is still a lot of garbage there, and that will go into the land, and there might be a very harmful chemicals that will mix with your water cycle and everything. But it's kind of a lazy solution. Like, you transform it into the park, and over the period of time, that uh, garbage you know will mix up with the sand, and will become what do you call that, um, like it will become a fertile land or something like that. But that's not the best solution. So to be honest, I don't particularly know many examples in India of this thing. But in Delhi, if I think about it, one is the transportation industry. Majority of now they have also introduced buses. That also changed to electric vehicles. And garbage dumping is another thing.
It's, yeah. Yeah, sorry, I was making a few notes.
Although we can always argue that even these electric vehicles are not sustainable. They have their own problems.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of mindsets, and I think there's kind of practical things to do for sure. And I'm always kind of interested in kind of how you shift behavior change, because again, that's a cultural thing, and that takes time. And quite often people look for examples, is that they want somebody to go, tell me or show me how it's done and I'll do it. And quite often what I find with systems in particular is that they're unique to their context. There isn't a system that you can just go, this works here, go and do it there, especially with something around regenerative cultures, because you are talking about people's behaviors, their attitudes, and also their access to education, to resource, to technology, to lots of different kind of aspects that help to shift and mold behavior. So I'm curious as to whether there's other examples that you're aware of that kind of try to move people towards that space, even though they might not have kind of got there yet. But are there teams or are there groups of people who are moving or trying to create that movement towards regenerative practice?
Another example that I know is in the agriculture. So there is a state called Punjab. It's in the northwestern part of India. So Punjab used to be a very fertile land, and they have like 2 to 3 rivers, 2.5 rivers. But over the period of time, because they were using a lot of pesticides during the Green Revolution time, they have used a lot of pesticides, and people are get used to it now. People, instead of using the organic agriculture, they move to pesticides for more profits. So what happened because of that is the water, it becomes poisonous, and the people, particularly in some regions, almost you can say every other house there is a cancer patient because of those pesticides. So what now is happening there is people are again going back to the organic farming.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's I think an example of a regeneration. People started to feel like what they have done in the past is totally wrong, and we need to change this.
Yeah.
So now, slowly, what they are doing is they are moving back to the organic farming,
Mhm.
and it's it is possible in Punjab because you have to understand like how the farmers they sell uh, their harvest in the market. So there are a government markets which directly buy from the farmers and they give them a minimum purchasing price for those farms. So, but in other states, that minimum price is not there. So because of that thing, the farmers don't get much benefit. So they are again uh, limited to use pesticides. But in the Punjab, it is possible because at least in the Punjab, the farmers get minimum purchasing price of their harvest.
Mhm.
So it's like an intervention by the government that at least because of the protest and all that thing, the government agreed to pay them the minimum purchasing price in the market. So the farmers are better off in the Punjab state. But in other states, the condition is really poor. The farmers are one of the poorest in the society. There are a lot of suicides, whereas this is like totally opposite in Punjab. The farmers are one of the richest in India in Punjab region because of this intervention, and it's in the transition phase. I would say it was extractive for a while during Green Revolution, and now it is moving back to the regenerative side.
Right.
Yeah, however, it is still in the very early phase because how it will impact the water level, the water bodies, because the water level is said to be very low now there
Right.
because some crops they need a lot of water.
Mhm.
Again, and the quality of the soil also becomes poor if you use pesticides for a long period of time. So
Mhm.
now if they're using organic farming, so hopefully over the period of time the quality of the soil would be improved and so that time will tell. But I think that's a good practice that they're again going back to the organic farming and they start to realize that there is a problem
Yeah.
and we need to tackle it.
Mm. Just think about kind of that transition space, and in terms of that push and pull, sometimes it's needed. Sometimes there is that short-termism of just realizing that this is what's happening.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and
So,
that
but
relevance and relatability for sure.
yeah, I mean they constantly strive for a better policy for the farmers. There are some farmer bodies who all constantly fight, protest and fight with the government to, give them, should have a better agricultural policies, better prices, so that farmers can actually uh, get more profit and their soil quality would be improved and all these things. I
Mhm.
don't know how much you follow the news about India, but like in 2020 during the COVID times, there was a farmer protest.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, that runs for 1 year. So that farmer protest was particularly for this thing because the government was introducing a private market, like private players can also come in the market and buy directly from the farmers.
Right.
So particularly the northwestern states, they fought for it because they know when the private players come, they initially they will give them more price, but when they get used to that, the government will close the markets, and then the private players will have the monopoly, and then they will reduce the price.
Mm.
So they fought for it because they knew the dangers, right? So I think that's one of the examples because they know the interventions and what interventions or what leverage points they need to make this transition.
Mhm.
So price is one of the point that they knew and they fought for. That's one example.
do you see something which I remember having a chat with Maya about quite a while ago? We were talking about kind of the role of I suppose of people and actually residents and their ability to have some level of control. Sometimes is that they take control by just doing it themselves without accessing kind of the wider system and the wider infrastructure, but because they don't have access to the right resources, or sometimes even the right technology, or just the right knowledge, sometimes is that everything it's low quality, it's not really kind of sustainable, it's not necessarily something which is regenerative, simply because what they're doing is not with regeneration in mind, it's with kind of livability for today. So I just wondered, is there the potential or other examples that you're aware of, either in Mumbai or beyond, about kind of how communities or how people are supported to explore and to develop and empower themselves in a regenerative way, in a regenerative sense?
Or I'm not particularly sure about that, but I'm very sure like there are some, how to say, bodies, like people bodies and associations who, or you can say intellectuals who, constantly do this kind of research and uh, suggest governments that, you shouldn't bring this policy to this, and that might have this kind of effect on. That is like most common in the, what do you call that, tribal areas.
Right.
Like if we take an example of tribal areas, so the tribal areas, they have their own way of living and they have their own boundaries, right? So for, as a government, they, who is focusing on the GDP growth, so they wants to expand the urban areas and, want to take their lands, the tribal community. So there are people who are working in this field and they, oppose the governments, and they even suggested the government policies what could have a damaging effect if we do this kind of things. So I think they work on this. I mean, that's one example I could see within India, uh, but not much example that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
To be honest, because I was outside India. I was studying in Taiwan for 4 years.
Okay.
So yeah, so I was not very aware of the recent news what's happening in India.
Yeah.
So I just came back to India, and now I started to read more stuff about what is happening in this field.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's difficult, even kind of within a small country like England or even kind of the UK, is that there are regional attitudes and differences. Within India, such a big country, such a huge population, these mammoth kind of urban centers as well, is that, yeah, just completely different kind of, I suppose, framework to operate within. Yeah, it's super fascinating. Just kind of even just reading the position paper and absorbing some of this. Some of it is sounds and feels familiar. Right, I know that in the UK and in lots of other kind of European countries, and I'm sure elsewhere as well, is that there are kind of growing communities around this topic, and they're really kind of forging a way through of innovating or social innovation to try and kind of acquire funding to go and test and pilot and work with people. And it feels like there is something there in terms of being able
Yeah.
to draw down examples from towns. But I suppose in the UK in particular, the only kind of mega city really is London, and that in itself feels like it's very self-contained, or its own little world in comparison to elsewhere. I imagine very similar with Mumbai, this huge.
Yeah, the financial hub.
Yeah, and it's kind of quite different when you've got this. I imagine a political point of view being very, very keen to be seen to be growing kind of globally as this powerhouse, standing shoulder to shoulder with, Singapore or Beijing or in Paris.
Yeah, that's one of the challenge also for India, because majority of population of the India are illiterate. They are not educated, right? And even people who are educated, our education system is very traditional.
Yeah.
It's not very flexible. So our education system don't give us chance to think beyond certain, or try something new, or mix different fields. So it's been changing. Probably in next 1 or 2 years, the new system has already there, but it's not implemented yet. But that's one of the challenge that I always feel, that until you don't change the education system, until you don't teach people uh, the new way of thinking, or educate to be a better person, or to live better in the society rather than to earn more money. Right now, what I feel is the education system, particularly here in India, is it's a kind of, I always say it's like a degree system. You get a degree, you go to the market, you get a job, you're earning money, and you're happy. It's like that, instead of actually educating people, the real meaning of education. And another example that I remember when you said about social innovation and all these things, there is another example in India that's very old example also. I mean, it's still continue now. It's an example of Grameen Bank. That's a banking system, Grameen banks.
Yeah.
So it's particularly for the poorest people. So what the Grameen Bank do is their interest rate is very low. It's very low, and the poor people who don't have resources, if they have some business, if they want to study or something, if they go to the mainstream banks, they won't give them loans, because they don't have anything uh, as a collateral to give banks as a collateral. So the normal banks, they don't give them loans. However, the Grameen banks, they give them loans. So there are many case studies on this, and it has been seen that the the quality of life, or the people's life, has been changed because of those small loans given by the Grameen banks. So that's, I think, the perfect example of regeneration, like supply money where it is required, rather than supply money for spending money. Like other people, they buy money, and they get a loan, and they go for vacation, or they buy a second house, third house. However, the Grameen Bank, they give money only to the people who need it the most, which is the poorest section of the society, whether it's for the business, study, or the job, or anything. That's, I think, the perfect example of regeneration.
Oh. Well, I'm trying to keep an eye on time, but nobody's kicked us out yet. And also feel free to go and join other conversations. You don't feel like you have to stay here with me.
I was actually late. I almost forgot. Like, oh, it's 6:30. I joined, I think, around 7.
Yeah.
I was really late.
No worries. No, it's fine. There are other transitions kind of being spoken about, so do feel free to kind of jump into them. But yeah, it seems we've got some things down. We haven't done too badly just for the two of us. We've got some things written down. We can back. So what's your plans, I suppose? What is it that you're interested in doing in this space? What is it that you're looking to explore?
Yeah, actually, last year I was graduated and I did my master's degree in system thinking because I was very fascinated and I really believe that is the solution of the climate problems. So after that, I tried to look for a job in system thinking or in ESG, this kind of things. But in Taiwan, I couldn't get any. So I recently moved back to India. I came here last month. So now I'm exploring and I'm like seeing if I could find any opportunity to, work in this field
Okay.
if possible. Yeah.
So, and what kind of job is it that you're looking for? What's the role that you're?
To be honest, like I'm not very sure what I should expect because system thinking, just like others, it's very new for me.
Okay.
So yeah, I have seen some jobs in system thinking, like IISD, they give some jobs in system dynamics, but that's a simulation part of it. And I've seen few jobs in USA and Europe because they are far ahead in ESG stuff, sustainability stuff.
Yeah.
But other than that, I would be interested in like investment, sustainable finance, regenerative finance, these kinds of stuff, like kind of analyst or maybe researcher. Like if I could, but I'm not very sure what I can expect. So I'm open to all possibilities. If I like the work, if I like the profile, then definitely I would give it a try.
Yeah. Cool. It's a difficult one because the job roles that exist today aren't necessarily going to exist tomorrow, especially in the world of sustainability and the world of things like AI will shift things significantly. So yeah, it's the kind of jobs that might be available is that they will shift. So how do you get ahead of that and then try to kind of make yourself indispensable? Kind of that's
yeah, right.
I think
that's also a challenge.
I'm going to send you my LinkedIn profile. If you're on LinkedIn, that is. If not, then
I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah, do feel free to connect. Because there's whilst don't necessarily work in the world of finance or ESG in particular, is that there's things around kind of regenerative business thinking and systems thinking that we get involved in quite a bit, and more around kind of the design aspect rather than yeah, like I said, the finance or the operational side of things. But there's people I'm connected to, so I can always kind of share connections and opportunities.
Yeah, I knew Laura's mom. I knew. I mean, new means like I'm in her LinkedIn. So yeah, I follow them. Oh, it's good. It's great to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Is there any? Well, apparently we can just carry on talking because nobody seems to have kicked us out yet. But yeah, go join another group if you want to. You're more than welcome. Unless there's anything that we've missed, kind of from our extractive to regenerative conversation and examples that we wanted to put in.
I have read some examples in UK also. It was about some lake. I don't remember the name, but I remember there was a project where there was a lake which is like totally dried up, and some local companies, one NGO and some local companies, they wanted to revive it. So they come together and they finance the whole project to regenerate the lake, the water bodies there.
Yeah.
Because those companies, they also use that water for their operations. So yeah, I don't remember the exact location and the project name, but I have seen some examples in UK also. It's about the lake. One example I've seen in Indonesia. Uh, I was in one webinar with IISD. Uh, yeah, they have shared one example of Indonesia where uh, a beer company, they were on the shore of one river there, very famous one. I'm not good with the names. So that beer, obviously, to make a beer, you need a lot of water,
Yeah.
and for the farmers, their income level was also getting low with the time because of this COVID and everything. So again, IISD, United Nation, there was beer company and some local farmers. They come together and then they, build, uh, decided and build this project to revive the local area. And so, yeah, according to the local requirements, according to the local environment, local atmosphere, uh, they did that project, and it really worked.
Yeah.
It really worked, So they are able to revive that land and both at the upstream and the downstream of the river. So that was some of the examples I have seen of regeneration.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that struck me and kind of, you have these little light bulb moments of going, aha. There's when you have these conversations with businesses or communities, especially in urban settings, is that quite often they're so disconnected from the land and from kind of organic systems and where their food comes from and how things actually work, and how I suppose kind of air management and land management is done within the Earth's kind of system. So far removed from it, you can't have those conversations in your urban spaces. As soon as you have them within a more kind of organic and outdoor and natural setting, is that people can start to physically see kind of actually what is being referred to. And actually there's a much greater connection there. And that was the thing which I went, yeah, it absolutely makes sense. As soon as somebody puts it in that way, you kind of go, yeah, we've got to stop having these discussions within buildings and within our meeting rooms and within lecture halls. We've got to go out. We've actually got to go and understand what it is that we're talking about, rather than this theoretical thing. And it's easy then to create those movements and bring those people together. Like that is a really good example around kind of the lake and place and understanding the landscape. Those businesses, like that kind of community of organizations, much easier to kind of come together and create an understanding or an initiative around it, because they know about it. Doing it inside of a 5-story building in the middle of a big city is that, yeah, it doesn't really kind of help to properly move people forward and come up with those innovative spaces and ideas. But anyway,
I think that's a good point. One example I knew about the food waste. Like, when I was in Taiwan, a lot of people they waste the food, and I used to tell them that there are millions of people who don't even get food. You must visit a country where you can see those people, then you would appreciate how important the food is, and we shouldn't waste it. And I have seen changes in the people, the actual changes when they visit like India or African countries. They actually change their behavior when they see it with their own eyes. The condition is so poor. So yeah, the food waste is one of the examples of
great. Awesome.
About
3 seconds. I'll see you this. Bye.
There you are again. We are running out of time a bit, so although it seems like you all had quite interesting discussions or sessions out there, it would be really nice to have a bit of sharing of the key insights or the process, or yeah, what came up during the sessions, what emerged out of you being there and working together on these different topics. So I would suggest that we start with room 1.
Oh, first of all, I will like to, I would like to say sorry because I was so involved with the discussion room 2 that I was typing in room 1. So.
Do you remember what
so you have the visual or circle?
So regarding systems thinking, education, whatever I typed, so I was like so involved with that. So I had zoomed in, so I couldn't see that I was in room 1. So sorry.
Okay. Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
So Hari, do you want to?
Yeah. So we had discussions on this growth and degrowth. So how does the growth look like in Mumbai? Mumbai, it's always about more and more of a GDP, more of a resources, more of a transportation. We need to provide this housing, transportation, everything to more roads, more automobiles. That's what the thing we have in Mumbai right now. And of course, like how does the degrowth look like in Mumbai? So it's limits to growth. We have to realize there is a limits to growth, and there will be like more community engagement opportunities in terms of art, poetry, to green space, to and all those things. The better public, we'll have like public health system, and of course circular economy approaches, models and approaches, and all these are the things we visualize in a degrowth model, how the Mumbai look likes. And there is also something called and how does the resources looks like, starting from the transportation to housing to and all. It's a sufficient, it's not more of a sufficiency, not the growth, it's a sufficiency. The better housing infrastructure, people need to travel less, transportation system travel less. Even if they have to travel, they need to travel by public transportation. They will be able to travel by public transportation. Again, there's better water management and waste management, and the resource pricing or charging something looks like, or which are way enables is something called the, like we have the electricity, the all the resources will be charged like that. You use more, pay more, this kind of things, so that there's something called we achieve something energy sufficient, energy or resource sufficiency. And what are the things we enable this transition? One is like you need a change in behavior. Of course, systems thinking education is required, and that's at the all levels, starting from the school level to all the levels, and maybe more emphasis on the business education. That's where like you need to educate or bring awareness about the systems thinking, using the systems thinking to approach and the sustainability. And other transition challenges we have is like there's more and more discussions required on equity. Currently, whenever the discussions comes on growth or degrowth, it's always development is means always growth, and they go just maximum beyond the growth is something discussions on equality, providing equal opportunities. But what we require is like the discussions and more discussions on equity. And also this regarding the development, we need to have a clear understanding of the qualitative and quantitative approaches of growth. It's not always economy or a GDP. There's various other measures need to take it. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, Hari.
Thank you.
So room 2 is next.
Yeah, for room 2, I think we had a huge explosion of topics stemming from what I think in room 1 you had talked about systems education, and we did start with education as a topic for demanding public goods and also involving citizens with this common public service that we all require. And I think Siddesh and Royden would be would love to talk about what maybe they have discussed, and because there's been a lot of topics that we had explored.
Yeah, to start with, what we believe is that we should have a common vision. It's not just a vision for the city. Now we have come to a point where, since we are talking about systems, we should start with the planet having a vision, and the vision of the planet getting zipped into the vision of cities, because we can't talk in isolation anymore, because we are facing a crisis at a planetary level. So that's where it starts. And the most important leverage that I think, at least, is that systems education is very important. As we already discussed, that knowing that there are limits to growth, the concepts such as this, not only at the business level, but at individual levels, and people to know that there are limits to growth, and there are concepts such as tragedy of commons and all such scenarios. So unless that awareness is not there, we will never progress, even develop as a city sustainably, is at least, So that's what, anything more. And also, we should have war footing solutions now. It's high time. That's what we discussed. And that's.
And I think we're also
public libraries. We talked about that, how much libraries are important. Especially having public libraries, public schools. This is more important than having private schools. That's what we discussed regarding the transition. Actually, Bombay had this much more earlier, 20 years ago, 15, 20. And we are moving towards more privatization. So, and we are suffering because of that. We can actually see the transition from public to private has made the city worse, and that is an prime example. Bombay was an amazing city to view in 20 years ago.
The whole model of privatization of education from universities to even libraries is not sustainable, and I feel possible transition could be say an intervention would or a public-private partnership to ultimately, as I had an idea, using existing universities and schools coming together, and when they're not active, let's say during vacations or even non-school hours, to giving the space to students who are not privileged enough to have their own rooms to study. So that would be a common-led initiative from different schools and etc. So yeah.
I think that's what were the main general topics that we had discussed, and some barriers also came up with what Manas had yesterday spoken about, that generally it's also coming from a philosophical and a very personal side of fear, in the communities upon stepping up to these challenges, but also the fact that the opportunities being that the climate change is demanding us to step out, and also situations like when there's a huge number of people who sign up to a certain movement, the government cannot deny it anymore, because this is one of the largest democracies we have on the planet. And once a number speaks up, naturally the authorities also respond. So yeah, that's what we talked about in the second room.
Thank you. That's great to hear. In our room, we also had discussed that the topic of degrowth is still quite a niche topic. So we need more discussion about it, which is also visible in your group, more public discussion especially, and engage more people within. So room 3, please, if you want to share a bit on what you elaborated here.
Hi, Bet. Yes, hi everyone. Happy to. I'll speak because one of the absolute joys of doing events like this, where it's self-selection, is that people choose which rooms to go in. And apart from one person who joined from New York who had technical problems, everybody was very much engaged, and I did join you in all of the conversations, as you've just heard, and as you will hear from Carl and the team in room 4. So what I'm saying is I ended up almost on my own for most of the discussion. So it turned more into a meditation on this transition here from piecemeal approaches to cities as complex systems. So if you'll let me, then maybe I can just share a few things that I've shared from my experience, and Rika from New York shared as well. So firstly, when we were thinking about how to perceive cities as complex systems, we went back to a bit of theory. And I don't know if people haven't come across yet, they might want to look at the socio-technical transition pathways. And I've included a screenshot, which is quite common, which is a really useful way I've found of mapping transitions. So, potentially the energy system, the housing system, how to look at embedding innovation into disrupting a regime, an existing state, and to changing it into a state that we would like. We also talked a bit about other approaches, such as a new science of cities, thinking of cities as flows rather than places and spaces, a reference there, and also urban metabolism. There's a really interesting sort of group of things at the bottom here. You can see the arrows, which is sort of one of the areas of work I've been involved in is around data-driven cities. Can be termed as smart cities, where you you install sensors and you collect data from smart meters and from vehicle movements and all of those things. And what I like to do is to term that the sort of nervous system of the city. So you're basically able to optimize the city based on every 5 minutes or every half an hour. You might reroute traffic, or you might route waste collection lorries into particular areas. But moving from that concept to still data driven, but tying that into long-term planning and strategy. And so that in that way, it moves almost from the nervous system to the brain, because there you're thinking about what are the objectives you're trying to achieve. Is it resilience? Is it equity? Is it zero carbon? Is it flourishing? What are those objectives for a community or for a city? And how do you use data to get there? So we talked about digital twins, integrated systems, planning, and those sorts of things. And then we came up to a question of can piecemeal include systems interventions? And so it might not actually be piecemeal if you're making an intervention, which might be a transport intervention, but in a way where you're considering the environment, you're considering ecology, you're considering jobs, economic growth or degrowth, you're considering materials. So some interesting points. There's a case study there of in Mumbai of some traffic lights that would stay red for longer if people kept on using their horns in their vehicles. So it's trying to reduce the problem of noise pollution in the city. And also, sorry, I'll pass on to the room 4, but just to say that the conversations from room 1 and 2 are really interesting. And we also looked at systems literacy and this idea of, understanding open data, systems literacy, understanding interdependencies between housing, transport, jobs, resilience, and so on, can help us move from a piecemeal to understanding and acting on cities as complex systems. So I hope that's okay.
Great, thank you, Stephen. It sounds really interesting, all the different topics that you came up with here, and also good to have these connections between the breakout rooms, but because this is what systems thinking is like. It's not always just focusing on this and that, but really connecting also to the other parts of the system. So let's head to the last room and see what emerged over there.
Ramandeep's kept himself on. Oh, there you go. You unmuted yourself. You go for it, Ramandeep.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know the format of this thing because I came late. I joined late, and we were just randomly discussing about the examples of extractive management and regenerative resource management. And we come across some of the examples of the extractives, like capitalist economic models, where we are basically have policies which are more extractive and leads to more waste, and examples from Mumbai and beyond, like the garbage problem is the biggest example of, I believe Mumbai has the same issue as in Delhi. And for the regeneration, mostly I think it's if I remember it correctly, it's mostly it's about the investments. What is your vision and how you invest your money that flows in the direction of where it is needed, and should be locally sourced, local economy, more focused on that thing. Common example is the regenerative agriculture, where we have an example from the Punjab region, where during the Green Revolution, they were using a lot of pesticides that leads to a lot of trouble there. And now they are moving back to the organic farming, and that is more regenerative, and the soil quality and the water bodies are getting improved now. So we were just discussing some examples of regenerative ideas. Then another example that we have discussed is about the Grameen Bank. So though the poorest, the people in India, they don't get loans from a mainstream banks because they don't have collaterals, right? So they get small loans from these Grameen banks, and then they use it for their education or for opening a small business. And that actually leads to a better life, a better quality of life for them, for their kids, for the future generation. That's an example of some of the examples that we have seen in India, particularly. Other than that, there are some few lakes that have been revived over the time in India. That is, yeah, some of the examples. You want to add in something, Tar? You want to add something?
No, so Ramandeep isn't from this particular kind of resource management area of work, and neither am I in terms of utilities and renewables, etc. So we actually spent a lot of time talking about the process of creating a regenerative mindset, and how do you build movements and cultures. And I think it very much relates to some of the conversations in team 1 and 2 about the need for education, the need for deeper work to understand what does regenerative actually mean, what does it look like within the context of a city and within a particular structure. So we spoke at kind of a bit more of a higher level, I suppose, rather than kind of going into the nuts and bolts as much as maybe some of the other groups did. But yeah, we spoke very much about how do we create that kind of movement towards a regenerative future, and the need for strong leadership within that space, but also how do we respond to some of the external shocks that do exist within our world, and how do we plan ahead for those. Yeah, so we had a great conversation, but it was just the two of us, so we had a good old chat for a little while, and made our notes. But we also recorded it as well, and we'll share the recording with everybody, so you can always kind of come back and add your own comments later, I'm sure.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, especially for also recording it and making it available. For all of you who are here, the Miro board will be available for you also after the session, and the recording of the session as well. So everything is, with exception of 3 breakout rooms, will be there. And yeah, wow, I'm really impressed. It's been really interesting to hear what has happened in all of the breakout sessions. We would like to hear from you a little feedback, as we are also constantly in learning moods. So if you have, I think I will give over to Stephen.
Thanks, Bertie. And just to say a huge heartfelt thank you to everybody here. I can see that there's been some really, really rich and fruitful conversations, and I hope that you've been stimulated, that you've learnt something, that you've met some new people. And we do encourage you to check out the Systems Innovation Lab. Join the Mumbai Hub if you haven't already. Join the Cities Hub if you haven't already, or just have a look around on the Systems Innovation Lab. You can find us, the links under the Where to Find Us section here. We're both on LinkedIn, and we have our own community website. And as Beata said, please do, if you have a moment, just add some of your icons, these fun stickers to answer these feedback questions. We're always learning, and we'd like to make sure that we can keep on improving. There's a little section to the bottom left here where if you have shared any articles to academic papers or to reports or to websites or any sort of resources that you think are really pertinent to this subject, then do share those here. Yeah, on the right-hand side, and as Beata said, this Miro board will still be open for you. You don't have to do it this minute. I know it's sort of late in the evening now for most of us, but if you would like to see other subjects in the future, maybe dive in a bit deeper into some of the topics that we've covered today, or you'd like to cover another topic, then please do use this to sort of help to set the agenda of what we cover in these sessions. So yeah, just to reiterate, thank you very much. It's been wonderful. Have great evenings, afternoons, wherever you are.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, everyone.